Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm your host, Roy. Of course, we are the show that brings you a wide variety of guests that can speak to a bunch of diverse topics. Of course, we want to help businesses understand maybe what they don't know, but we also want to provide experts in different areas that can help them when they know they have an issue that they do need to solve in order to be successful. So today, we're happy to have Felix Cao. He has accrued over 15 years of business experience when it comes to sales and marketing. He's been featured in major media outlets such as HuffPost, Adweek, and Authority magazine, and has appeared on a major Canadian morning radio show to talk about neuromarketing and the 2019 Canadian elections. You can find him on numerous top podcasts where he shares neuromarketing insights on how business can grow and thrive during the pandemic and moving forward into 2021. Today, his neuromarketing company called Happy Buying Brain, he is combining his 15 years of business experience with his educational background in biology and psychology to truly help businesses understand what makes their customers' brains tick and when it comes to better achieving customer brand loyalty over their competitors through the power of implementing neuromarketing into their own marketing campaigns. Felix, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us. It's certainly a pleasure to have you here. I've been looking forward to talking to you for a while. This is going to be an interesting conversation.
Well, hi, Roy. Thank you for the really kind introduction there.
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate being on your podcast.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to have a really meaningful and good conversation that your listeners will certainly find impactful.
So I will tell you the one shortcoming is I just don't know enough about the subject to probably ask intelligent questions. So let's start at the beginning, and then how did you find yourself here of, taking your sales and marketing experience and combining it and coming up with the neuromarketing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to really kind of explain things is to kind of take the audience through the walk of the journey, so to speak.
Okay.
So let's say that if you and I were to have this conversation, 20 years ago, you would find, I'd be a student in post-secondary and university with a very high interest when it comes to biological science and psychology. By that time, the inspiration was more geared towards the health field. During that time, it was more towards actually getting into optometry. Business was not in the picture at all.
Okay.
So that twist in terms of the trajectory was quite unexpected, but it was a welcome, unexpected, outcome that came out of it. So that where a lot of the kind of educational background came from was having a strong interest in terms of the biological sciences and how the mind worked. And then what ended up happening later on in my mid-20s is I came across, some friends that were more attuned to the business world, and they introduced me to the self-employment side of things. And that's where I got the opportunity to work in several industries, such as the, finance, investment, and insurance industries. So that was the very first introduction in terms of transitioning into the world of business. So it went from kind of like the book kind of theory world into the more, conversations and building relationships. So that was a really, really fun part. I think it's just getting the opportunity to talk to people. So, spent a couple of years in that, and then met another group of friends, and they were actually involved in technology. So this is, roughly the early 2010s. And during that time, we spent nearly a decade during that time in terms of the tech and mobile space. And what we noticed segueing into the neuromarketing side of things was that at the tail end of our tenure in the tech space, we were looking at all the different trends that were happening. So in the 2000s, it was obviously the internet that came about, and then 2010s is more of the mobile movement with iPhones and Androids. And then when we were looking forward, we noticed that we're at the cusp of another technology revolution, which this time involves artificial intelligence, machine learning, and virtual reality. And what we noticed that at the core of a lot of these innovations was actually neuroscience. So what we looked at it was that the concepts of neuroscience could be applied to industries outside of technology. So one of it was business and marketing. So we looked at the overall landscape, and we in terms of the timing, was a really good time, because usually when you have kind of trends that become popular, any concepts that are associated with it also become familiarized and popular as well. So that's why we made the transition in terms of combining, let's say my 15 years of being in business with the educational background of biological sciences and psychology. And then it was just a perfect marriage in terms of the timing, especially right now, as we look to transition to this new technical or technology revolution. And the pandemic, obviously, kind of helps speed this, as, companies are looking for better ways to maximize the ROIs or their budget when it comes to connecting and reaching their customers. So that's how, our neuromarketing company, Happy Buying Brain, came about.
Okay. Yeah, that's an awesome story. I like those that, you kind of started on one path and ended up somewhere totally different. And, I think it's a great time to be in this, not only for the, the pandemic, but also, there's so much information out there that we really need to be differentiators, not just the same message to you, because depending on what we're selling, you feel about that one way. You may be very passionate about, you need to touch it and feel it and smell it. And me, I'm just like, I don't care if it's blue, green, or red or whatever. I just need one.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's just, as you mentioned, there's just so much information, and there's pretty much a new way or a way to connect with the audience, no matter how they find that connection with the people or with brands, for example.
Right.
So it gives them options in terms of how to build those relationships.
So what about channeling? Is this across the spectrum as far as print, audio, visual? Does it run the gamut, or do y'all kind of focus on one type of delivery system?
Well, the thing is, when it comes to the human brain, the body, right, they respond to multiple stimuli. So ideally, we want to be able to understand the consumer and engage them on as many senses as possible, because the more, let's say, if we touch something, yes, we have a tangible feel for it. But then if we combine that, let's say, with the smell and then the hearing, so the experience becomes a lot more amplified.
Yeah.
So then the recall of, let's say, a brand also becomes amplified as well.
Okay.
So ideally, the ideal situation is, if all these different senses could be touched on, then that's the best way to, engage or attract a customer, for example, or people in general.
Yeah.
Right. Like even for communication, there's a difference between, in terms of the level of intimacy versus receiving an email compared to meeting someone face to face.
Correct.
Because there's a lot more in terms of the senses that are engaged. Right now we hear each other's voices, we could see each other, for example. There's a lot of nonverbal cues that come into it. Whereas when we read, let's say, an email for somebody, that might get lost in translation, for example, or it may not, be expressed in a way that it would take a lot of mental effort to really picture what the person is really thinking, because the mind is, it doesn't like to do a lot of work, right? One of its focal points is to be energy efficient. So only when it has to kind of put themselves, someone has to put themselves in the other person's shoes, then that's when we start kind of utilizing that mental capacity. So we can make it easier on people by already having it out there. Then it makes their life a lot easier, and it makes the experience a lot more memorable as well.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess that's one reason why, videos do so well in so many tests too, also because they touch so many senses. We can actually see them and see, hear, and probably that like you were saying, the visual clues versus the written word. I know that there's been a lot of research, like when you post a blog article, for instance, it's like they say, if you put the text up there, that's awesome. If you put a picture on there, it's even better because you'll draw some people's attention. But if you use video, that's the very best that you can do.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Because words, it's, it's something that your logical brain or your cortex, which is the really developed part, has to really it understands, it has to really process it. So it takes, that's the part of the brain that takes the most energy, and it does a lot of the mental work, right? Whereas you have an older part of the brain called the primal brain, and that just knows what is, like it's really basic, for example. So when it sees a picture, it's going to understand whether that's a picture of an elephant or like a spoon, right? So that's why it's a difference in terms of this helping, the viewer understand what it is that you're looking to convey. And then, they say a picture, there's I think 170,000 words in the English language. So a picture would be essentially worth, not just 1,000 words, but up to, like the ability to convey up to 170,000 words. Wow. Whereas a video, that's infinite.
Yeah.
Right, so that's infinite. So that video is definitely where, the most engaging type of medium.
Yeah, that's some good. So what are some examples of companies that have, put y'all's, I don't want to call it technology, but put y'all's, the neuromarketing into play, and that's really helped them out?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's several ways to look at it, right? So in terms of neuromarketing, how does it impact campaigns, for example, marketing campaigns? One way is to attract attention and to increase engagement. Second way is to maximize ROI. Third way is to get a better understanding of, your ideal customer avatar, for example. And, another very prominent way to use neuromarketing is how do you mitigate loss, for example, before rolling out a product, right? So let's say in terms of engagement and attention. So one of the ways to actually do that is what we call the orientation response. So especially this is really prominent in videos. So all it is just shifting angles every couple of seconds, right? And what that does is it causes the brain to now have to pay attention to that new stimuli, because through evolution and over time, and this explains like why marketing works versus the traditional marketing, which more talks about like the how and the what, whereas neuromarketing talks about the why something works. So when you have when you implement the principle of orientation response, which is pretty much a shift in the angles that happen every few seconds, on an evolutionary basis, our brains, or the primal brain, is actually designed to pick up new stimuli. And the reason why it does that, it needs to figure out, is this new stimuli, does it add to my survival and reproductive success? So back in the day with our ancestors, for example, they used to walk around and when they spot, let's say, a plant on the ground, that caught their attention, because now their brains, or their primal brain, it goes into this mode where it wants to assess, is this safe to eat? If it is, then is it going to increase my chance of survival? And also, or is this a threat to me? If I eat poison ivy, then obviously you're not going to do too well, right?
Right.
Exactly. And also goes in terms of the mating side. So if you meet new people, for example, is this person, are they going to, increases the chances of, let's say down the road, a suitable partner to pass your genes on? Or is that person that you met down the street, they're holding something in their hand, are they a potential threat? So the same way, so even today, the human brain is actually still governed by those same guidance systems. So that's why when we have a shift in angle, it causes the brain to really reevaluate things from a different perspective each time. And that's what keeps it engaged and keeps the attention.
Yeah.
So, some examples of that is like the Old Spice commercial. So you have a gentleman and he's in his washroom. So it's no big deal, right? Because, it's there's a correlation and association with using deodorant and being, just taking a nice shower. But then all of a sudden, like the background shifts to him being on the beach, and then him being on the, on a farm. So these kind of like these pattern interruptions, those are one of the things that causes the primal brain to have to reorient itself and pay attention to that new stimuli that's coming in. And, that's something that Old Spice found to be very effective in their videos to not only grab their attention, but to keep their attention as well. Another company is, for example, Energizer. So everybody knows Energizer, the battery, and they know the bunny. The bunny's been around for like 30 years, and he beats on the drum, right? And he keeps on saying, he keeps going and excuse me, and going and going. But the real creative part is, how do you keep a concept like that still new, right? Because there's only so many ways that a bunny can move and beat on a drum.
Right.
And if you've been doing that close to 3 decades, like people are, they're going to get used to it, right? But, in a commercial they did a few years ago, they did something really creative. So that commercial was 15 minutes. So it starts off with the bunny beating on his drum, but then about halfway through, it shows this brief pause for maybe like half a second. And what ends up happening is the bunny turns back, looks through the camera at the viewer, and then what it says that, it keeps on going and going longer with the power of carrots. So just that kind of like that pause, turn around and have a look, and to say that, hey, like not only does it keep on going longer, but it keeps on going longer with carrots. And in fact, he's actually, instead of holding like a drumstick that you would expect him to be beating on the drum, he's actually holding a carrot that he was using. So that was something that was very innovative that a lot of people I don't think expected when they're watching that video. Yeah. And you remember those kind of those changes, right? Especially when it breaks it's novel and it breaks the regular pattern of thinking, because there's studies that say that that humans we get up to 12 to 60,000 thoughts a day.
Wow.
But about 95% of those are on repeat. So that leaves us very little room for like new thoughts, new behaviors. So just the idea of like having that pattern interruption, that's what allows, the like companies to kind of break through the noise, because it breaks through that kind of repetitive thought, right? By having those pattern interruptions. So those are examples. And also when you're writing blogs, and you probably heard about this as well, it's called hippocampal headlines. So that is pretty much, you're using something they call it, the concept is novel and safe. So the primal brain is one of the main functions is, what it is actually the lower part of your brain. So it's anything but, let's just say, just to keep it simple, it's anything but your logical brain.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So it holds like your emotions. It's the thing that when you see something, even though you're not able to clearly identify it, your heart starts racing until 2 seconds later, when you actually look at it and you figure out that that's just like a mannequin, for example, right? So that's the part of the brain that's more subconscious. It deals with your physical body. It's fast, automatic, reflexive, and it deals more with the fight or flight response, right? So that's at the very base, and that's the reptilian brain. So sitting on top of that is your midbrain, and that deals with more emotions and social situations. So together you have the reptilian brain and the midbrain that comprises of your primal brain. And then what sits on top of that is what everybody knows, your more rational, logical part of the brain, right? Your cortex, for example. So the understanding the primal brain, which is the foundation of neuromarketing, it's so important to understand that part of the brain, because that part of the brain is where the subconscious mind lives, but it also influences up to 95% of our everyday behaviors. So in the world of business, for example, for the business owner, that would influence what they're doing on a daily basis to grow their business. And a lot of that's on automatic, right? And then on the other side is the consumer. Their buying behaviors are also highly influenced by their primal brain, in which, up to 95% of their purchasing decisions are done on a subconscious level. So that's why understanding, like the emotions that come into it, and also, things like status and things like that is a big driver in terms of getting insight in terms of, the decision-making process when it comes to, let's say, a brand wanting to connect with their audience, or even within a company, how do they make their company work, or the employees a lot more happy and work a lot more efficiently as well. So, that's something that's very, very important. But going back to the hippocampal headlines and the primal brain, is that one of the main core functions of the primal brain is threat detection. So here, because of, we're not running away from saber-tooth tigers, but because we're governed by a lot of those same guidance systems that catch our attention, we want to be able to identify stimuli that is safe, but yet we're always on the lookout for stimuli that's novel as well, like that new fruit on the tree that can increase our chances of survival, or that new, significant other that, we have a relationship with, for example. And tequila, for example, there's a tequila company, and they had a very good headline. They, everybody knows the saying, practice makes perfect, right? But what they did was they had practice makes patron, because the name of the tequila company is Patron.
Yeah.
So by by kind of adding something that's very familiar, which is practice makes perfect, with and now putting a spin on it and adding that novelty of like Patrick makes patron. It's like two of the three words make sense. Like they kind of come together, but where did the patron came in? And that's something that is an attention grabber when it comes to especially the written language. So that's something that in blogs or articles, that seems to be very, very effective. So once again, that's the hippocampal headline.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's very important. And also when it comes to, even the packaging, for example, Frito-Lay's, so they're a company that makes chips and they're owned by Pepsi, which is, a powerhouse in the soft drink industry. And at that time, they're looking to get more involved in they felt that the female demographic was highly underserved. And at that time, the packaging of their chips was actually in a shiny bag. So they ran brain studies on it to see how the participants would respond to their shiny bags. And what they found was there was an area in the brain that was becoming highly activated. And that part of the brain was actually associated with feelings of guilt. So the conclusion was that, when these female participants were looking at the shiny bags that the Frito-Lay's was packaged in, they're associating the brand and eating the chips with feelings of guilt. So what they did was they changed their packaging from the shiny bags to the matte style bags. Right. And then when they did the brain studies with the new design, what they found was there's a drastic reduction in that area that would indicate guilt. And as a result, that the female audience or the participants, they had a much more positive association eating the Frito-Lay's chips as opposed to when it was packaged in the shiny bags. And that, of course, led to an increase in sales, right? So that's one, really good example when you're looking to tap into a brand new demographic, for example, to have that type of understanding. Also, Campbell's soup. So, Campbell's soup is a staple that everybody has grown up with, right? Mm-hmm. So, back in the early 2010s, they wanted to make improvements in terms of their current soup label. So what they did was they made it more human. They added a human face. They eliminated the large spoon, and they want to appeal more to the senses by adding aroma vapors. And what they found by making that one change was that their sales increased by 12%. Now, 12%, it may not seem a lot to companies, but at that time, Campbell's soup was doing close to $7 to $8 billion annually. So a 12% increase is close to $1 billion in extra sales by making that change. Wow. Right. So these changes are quite significant. And then I'll bring in, the opposite example where companies that, had they used neuromarketing, or maybe they did use neuromarketing, but maybe had they gone to more insights into it and looked at the data, perhaps they would have came to these conclusions. Was M&M, for example. They did a Super Bowl commercial in 2018. And it starred Danny DeVito. So at first it starts off with two M&Ms. And, M&Ms always have a problem because they taste so good and people always want to eat them. Right? So they're walking down the street. Yeah. And they're talking to each other and they're saying, oh, you know what? Like every time that we walk down the street, everybody always says that they want to eat us. And then, of course, something happens. And then one of the M&Ms morphs into Danny DeVito. So now Danny DeVito is a human. So he's walking around and he knows he's a human now, but he wants to know, but he still thinks like an M&M. So he's walking up from human to human down the street and he's asking him, hey, do you want to eat me? And do you want to eat me? And of course they don't, because he looks like a human. He's no longer an M&M, right?
Right.
So he's in the middle of the street now and he's raising his hands like in this like pure like joy and victory, because like that's the whole point of an M&M. He doesn't want to be eaten, right? That'll be like the prime of his life. And then it hits this climax where you all of a sudden see a bus enter the picture and it just hits him. And then he goes right into this, into this grocery market with the fruits and veggies. So that would happen about the 20-second mark. So, this in total, this commercial was about 30 seconds long. And then what they found was doing these brain studies after Danny DeVito got hit by the bus, the last 10 seconds, the engagement was a lot lower. So at that time, to be at the time per second, companies were paying about $100,000 a second. So for that 10 seconds, M&M, for example, was paying, $1 million, for example. Right. So if they had that, if they knew that engagement was really, really low, there's several things that they could have done. They could have perhaps, assuming that there was no limitations in terms of the length that they had to make it. But let's say that there wasn't, they could have probably just made a 20-second clip and kind of ended there. Or else they would have found more effective ways to make it more engaging for the last 10 seconds. So that, in a way, would have made the $1 million that was invested into that last 10 seconds of the commercial a lot more effective. That's something that's very important. Also, one thing that helps mitigate risks as well is Chrysler, for example. They were designing their headlights, and they were thinking about going with the more sleeker type of look. And but what they did was, once they ran brain studies on it, they noticed that when they designed the headlights to be more humanoid, so more like human shaped, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Then a part of the brain that becomes activated, that's associated with reward and deals with the dopamine system, that part of the brain became a lot more active. So by making that change from initially thinking that, hey, maybe our customers would like sleek looking headlights to more humanoid headlights, that saved them potentially millions of dollars in terms of manufacturing costs, had they decided to roll everything out in full force without doing those brain studies of how their consumers would respond, to sleek headlights versus humanoid headlights. So, it's really neat to see like all these different things, kind of different impact that it may have in terms of not only increasing ROI, the packaging, and also mitigating risk. And also this, how we talked about in terms of multi-channel, how do you engage multiple senses so that your brand becomes more memorable, right? So, there's actually a very popular cartoon that's been running for probably like 20 something years called South Park.
Yes.
So most people have heard of South Park, and they released a game, a few years ago, and they wanted to make it really immersive. And so they have, of course, a game you play it on a screen, but they made this contraption where it goes over the nose actually, and there's every single time there's an action that correlates to this gas smell, then it actually releases that gas smell. So not only do you get the visual senses and the audio, but now you actually get this, it actually activates your smells as well. So while you're playing the game, yes, it's
interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty neat, pretty neat idea when they came up with it. So you'll definitely remember that experience when you'll be smelling the gas as you're playing the game. Just more on kind of like a basic level is you can use pictures to even associate senses with your brand. So let's say that you're not able to build some sort of equipment for your customers. There's one company that sells essential oils, and essential oils are, the first thing comes to mind is like, this stuff is not the best tasting stuff. So how do you change that perception, right? So what they did was, in a lot of their advertisement and website, they would have their essential oils placed next to fruits that really make your mouth water, like citrus, lemons, oranges, for example.
Yeah.
So by doing that, what they're doing now is they're associating the taste of their essential oils to the mouth-watering effect of the citrus fruit.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's, something like that. You don't need to do these brain studies, but what you can do is, apply a lot of these neuromarketing strategies that are based on these neuromarketing research into, companies' marketing campaigns. So that's another idea. And of course, one that was really cool, I really thought, in terms of engaging multiple senses, was they wanted to test how scent or smell would impact virtual reality experiences. So they would, have participants, they would have the big virtual reality machines cover their eyes.
Right.
And they would have different types of visuals where some of them would be non-stimulating, like sitting on a bench, for example, all the way through to riding a roller coaster, right? So they wanted to see, does, adding scent really amplify the intensity of the experience? And what they found was that, intuitively we think that, if we take two different types of senses, then it'll be like a synergistic effect, and it should be something, the overall effect should be a lot more powerful. But for example, when they tested it with a high intensity type of virtual reality experience and they added scent to it, they found that the level of intensity was a little bit more than without the smell. But the biggest impact it has was when participants were viewing kind of, if you want to say, more or less stimulant or less, or maybe more boring scenes, right? Like sitting around on a chair, for example. And by adding scent to those type of experiences, it actually helped retain their attention. So that's very important. So if you're, let's say, have peaks in your presentation, or even someone walking through your physical store, or even on your website, or website will be kind of hard because the scent doesn't come through, but let's say a physical store, you would have those scents so their attention doesn't totally just break off, and they just lose their attention, want to go somewhere else. So that was very important in terms of that finding of how scent actually impacts low stimulating experiences.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of good stuff there, Felix. And I know that we are up against a hard stop, so I'm going to go ahead and we'll try to do a wrap up. But
Okay.
I'm going to invite you back on because I've got a lot of questions. As you're talking, just a lot of things come up about the, I'm gonna go ahead and prime you with some questions for the next time. But appealing to the
Absolutely.
logical brain versus to the emotional. Men and women, I know we need, women tend to do the grocery shopping. So in your example, we probably want to skew to that. But I was thinking just the opposite, that, some guy walking into the convenience store, the bright, shiny object is definitely going to get his attention, to go by. But, it's like, how do people make those decisions, especially when you're dealing to multiple? And then, the other big one I thought about too was the, new Coke. When it came out and was a colossal failure, was that because of people's perception that they're messing with they're messing with something that's good, or was the product just really not that good? I have my own opinions on that, but sometimes we can get locked into not wanting to change, or something is good that it can, I guess, give us a conception that this new thing is not going to be any good, so we will make it a failure before we even give it a chance. So
Yeah. So I know that we have to come to hard stop pretty soon, but I just want to touch on that.
Yeah.
So when they released that new Coke, it was in a clear, I believe the color was more clear, right, at that time. So there was, in terms of the leap, it just happened too fast.
Yeah.
For example, so people didn't associate, let's say, like a clear color with how Coke looks like, for example, because Coke is more dark, right?
Right.
During that time. And that's why when they made the transition back to their original color, then people start recognizing again that this is how Coke should look like.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a time, like kind of like the boiling frog, and that's why I call it the novel but safe approach. So it's not this total blue ocean type of change where you're just looking for something that's totally brand new.
Yeah.
So this is something that already has some sort of foundation, and now you're just adding a layer on top of it that's novel, right?
Yeah.
So it's called, another way to describe it is called a most advanced yet acceptable. This is most advanced, meaning, this is something is new because it's advanced, but yet it's acceptable by our standards because we have seen something very similar to this before. Yeah. So it's not like you're taking somebody on this big ride in terms of a totally new revolution, that it's like a brand new concept.
Right.
You want to be able to guide them properly through it. Yeah. And, a lot of that had to do with the packaging as well. And I'll explain probably on our next time that we have the opportunity to talk, the Diet Coke can, in terms of how they made it, where it's still seen by the audience or their customers as a drink that's still light, but at the same time still has the good taste of a regular Coke.
Yeah.
So the packaging and the design around that does a lot of neuroscience in terms of how that works as well. So that's something that we could touch on. And of course, with the female as well. And there's certain ones that it's very interesting because I wrote an article on that, back in 2020.
Okay.
About the different shopping behaviors, about how females shop as well, and due to evolutionary changes and also some structural differences in the brain, and we can certainly touch on those as well. So there's lots of things that we can certainly do.
Yeah. Well, definitely,
Absolutely.
we're going to get you an invite to get you back on here because this is, this is good stuff. And like, we kind of were talking pre-show about some things, and there's just so much noise out there. There's, social media. It doesn't matter where, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, everybody's gone to videos. So you're being slammed with all this, stimulating content. We've got to find a way to set ourselves apart from all that noise. And so I think that's why this is such a great subject to talk about. And why we need to go a little bit deeper, see if we can help these guys
Absolutely.
out. So, okay. All right, Felix. Well, before we let you go, one thing is, what's a tool or what's a habit that you have during, that you use during the day that you feel adds a lot of value? And it could be professional, it could be personal, but just,
I think just reading for 10 minutes a day. I think that just that alone time, like how you mentioned that there's just so much happening in our world today.
Yeah.
Especially now there's a lot of overlap with work and home.
Yeah.
Just giving yourself, 10, 15 minutes of load time. And whatever that could be your favorite hobby. That could be, in my case, I'll take that 10, 15 minutes to read. That just gives you, gives, in my opinion, or gives people just the ability to kind of like separate themselves from kind of like everything that's happening around them and just kind of regroup and collect their thoughts. And then that's very re-energizing. So then when it's time to go for the rest of the day, then at least, you're in a good place emotionally and mentally as well to start things off on the right foot.
Right. Yeah. And that's a good point. I try to read every night, when I go to bed, because what I find is, I'm always thinking, stuff is always cooking. And so, when I lay down, if I don't take that time to read, the reading for some reason, it just puts me in a different place. It cuts off all the
100%.
the business and work thoughts where I can actually, rest and relax a little bit. So, Felix,
Exactly.
tell everybody, basically who is your client, what you can do for them, and of course, how can they reach out and get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with, so we're a B2B company. We work with mainly businesses. They could be usually we work with small and medium size, but large sizes as well.
Okay.
The main thing is, number one is understanding their ideal customer avatar a lot better, especially how their primal brains, there's a lot of people who are in a state of heightened fear, anxiety, and showing companies how do they position their brand to eliminate or alleviate, these fears and uncertainty, and be the ultimate solution, even placing their brand as a solution to these societal problems like, all these social inequalities or gender equalities. And that way it will allow the brand to build a strong connection and a deeper connection with their audience. And, implementing the strategies that we talked about in terms of the packaging. How do you engage multiple senses? How do you mitigate, risks by testing certain concepts out? Also, there's plenty of things in terms of how do you grab attention, product placement, for example, website designs. So, anyone that's unhappy with their current way of doing marketing, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with them and show them how they could reach the higher marketing goals by implementing neuromarketing into their current marketing strategies.
Okay. Awesome. And how can they reach out and get a hold of y'all?
Absolutely. So number one is come to our website, happybuyingbrain.com, and you can reach us through the contact form, or you can reach me directly at felix@happybuyingbrain.com. And another good place to find me is on LinkedIn. So if you search Felix Cao, then I'm more than happy to connect with people on there and have a conversation to see how we could help them.
All right. Felix, thanks so much for taking time out of your day. We certainly do appreciate all the great information, and we do look forward to getting you back on here and continuing this conversation.
Perfect. Thank you, Roy.
Yeah, so that's going to do it for another episode of the Business of Business podcast. You can, of course, find us on www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com. We are on all the major social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. This video, there will be a video of this interview will go up on YouTube as well. We are on all the major podcast platforms, iTunes, Google, Stitcher, Spotify. If we're not on one that you use, please reach out. We'll be glad to get ourselves on there. So Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of your business.